Hello everyone, how are you all? I hope you're all doing fine and welcome to Glecta. This is your biology session and I hope you guys are all excited. If you haven't liked the video yet, like the video, share it with your friends and subscribe our channel. Now for those who are new here, it's like a ritual now, let's introduce what Glecta is. So Glecta is a London-based tutoring platform which provides services for 11 plus, KS3, GCSEs and A levels for all the boards. Hello everyone, how are you? So now that we know what Glecta is, if you haven't enrolled with us yet, I would advise you guys that you should, because we all know that GCSEs are going to start in May, so you better get started with your preparations. So for that, enroll with us. Now moving on to what we're going to do today. So we're going to cover a few more topics of GCSE biology, basically the ones that are most important and somehow tricky to remember. So the topic that we're going to cover today is blood vessels and the heart. But if you ask me, I can also say all of this is a part of a single topic, which is the circulatory system. You must have studied about this in year 10 if you are in year 11, or if you are in year 10, as soon as your biology classes start at school, this would be the topic that you would start doing. So talking about the circulatory system, what do you think that is? What do you think circulatory system is and what do you think it provides to the body? What are the services? Okay, Dennis says I'm great at biology, that's nice. Now talking about the circulatory system, the best way to explain this can be that the body is like the city of Venice. Now the city is basically a city where there is no roads. There's only waterways to travel. So if you have to go from one place in the city to the other place, you would have to take boats to travel. Human body is pretty much like that, because if you have to send something from one part of the body to the other, you cannot go through roads. You would have to take waterways. So for those waterways, we have three things. We have the blood, that is the liquid medium that flows through the body. The blood vessels, which are like waterways in which my blood is going to flow, which if it does, then only can the blood have a direction to flow into. Otherwise, because it's liquid, it can go either ways. And to make sure that the heart only travels in the blood only travels in one direction, we have the heart. And also because we have to keep the circulation going on. The blood that's reaching our tip of the toes have to come back up against the gravity. So even for that, pumping of the heart, the beats of the heart help us to enable the entire body to have the blood flowing through it continuously. Now, let's start with one topic each. Let's start with the blood first. What do you guys see in this picture? What do you think this picture is about? So, I see, maybe it's like a slide, and I see some dots, some splashes of blue color, and then there's one big globe right in the middle. What do you think actually makes this? What do you think this should be? Because it is a view of under the microscope, which means it's a zoomed up picture. This is a picture of blood, which means if you prick your finger, get the blood on a slide, look that under a microscope, this is probably how it's going to look. Now, can you think about what are the parts of the blood that you see here? Hello. Hello, Alexa. Now, talking about what do you see on this slide? If you look at it, we see the blood. But then what is this tiny circles? And then we have these blue splashes. What's this one blob right in the middle? These are the blood cells. Talking about each one of them individually, These circles, whichever one look kind of hollow on the inside, are red blood cells. So these small circles are red blood cells. Then coming to the splashes that we see, only 4 of those on the slide. These tiny splashes are known as platelets. And this big middle blob that we have here is the third type of blood cell, which is the white blood cell. And all of these 3 together make the major component of the blood. But these are cells, these are solid, which means this does not help us let the blood flow. It has to be something else, because cells are solid. So when we separate the blood, how do you separate the blood? So basically we use sedimentation, but through a machine that's known as centrifuge. So what we do is, we take a test tube, let's say this is my test tube, we put it in a centrifuge and we rotate it. So it goes round at really fast speed, about 500 rounds per minute. So when it goes that fast, the solid in the entire blood settles down. Once that happens, I have cells at the bottom, the platelets as well at the bottom, and then at the top is left the liquid. And that liquid is the plasma. So everything that has to travel through the liquid medium is present in the plasma, not in the cells. Cells, the red blood cells, are the most in amount, so they get to the deepest end of the test tube, the bottom of the test tube. Then we have white blood cells and platelets right in the middle, which is like a faded line. It's not really yellow like plasma, it's not really red like red blood cells. In the middle, we have something blurry. It's like milky white line. That milky white line is going to consist of white blood cells and platelets. So this is about how many parts or how many constituents that does a blood have, which means the blood have the blood cells, which is red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. And then we have the 4th liquid component, which is the plasma. And all of this together helps us in transportation. Now talking about why does body need transportation? What is it that I need to take from one part of the body to the other? Because we know for a fact that everything in the body, we get it from the outside or the body is producing on its own. Now, the transportation is about, if you guys remember digestion, once it is completed, once the food is broken down, the digested materials are to be absorbed in the body, which happens in small intestine. Once that happens, what goes is in the blood. Now it can't stay where it is, it has to keep on flowing. So whatever you've digested gets into the blood, and then it is distributed to all the other parts of the body, because every part of the body does need energy, and you get energy from glucose. So you absorb the glucose from the food and then you transport it into the entire body for energy. Similarly, for all the other components like amino acids, we need to make proteins. So every cell's ribosome needs amino acids. And then we have fats, which is fatty acids and glycerols. They also are transported in the body because they are a good source of energy. So the transportation helps us first provide energy by distributing or assimilating the food. Next is that, for example, oxygen. When you breathe in, the oxygen goes in, and that also has to go to every single cell in the body from the head to the toe. Because even your brain needs to work, but also your legs need to work. So whatever is working would require energy, and you get energy from 2 things, glucose and oxygen. Similarly, whatever is performing respiration would release carbon dioxide. So it has to go back to the lungs, which means it's collected from the entire body, given back to the lungs, so that lungs can expel them out then. So this is the basic idea of circulatory system. So you can say it helps us in transportation. Whenever we need to transport something, circulatory system does that for us. Moving on to, let's quickly read through what are the functions of each part of the blood, because this is the smallest part. The heart is the biggest part, so we'll focus on that more. But let's just read through the functions once. It says plasma, or the blood plasma, works as a transport medium. Like I said, it's the only liquid in the blood. It's a yellow colored fluid. Substances that are carried by plasma around the body are waste carbon dioxide back to the lungs, urea that's formed in the liver as a result of breakdown of proteins. Urea, urine. So this is where you get urine from. Urea makes the urine because all the urea, it's collected from the liver, given to the kidneys, then kidneys separate it out from the blood, they basically like filter it out from the blood and then throw it out of the body. Then we have digested and absorbed food material from the small intestine. Like we said, every single cell in the body needs energy, so I need to have that. Moving on to, what do you think is happening in this diagram? Well, I see lungs, which means it has to be about breathing. Then we see oxygen going into the red blood cells. Then we see going that into the organs. Then we see something else coming out, going on to the red blood cell. And then they say that that is carbon dioxide. Now, the red blood cells are exactly for that one thing. We need them to transport gases, especially oxygen in the body. So talking about the red blood cells, about 5 million in each cubic millimeter of blood. What does that even mean? What that means is, if I take 1 cube of 1 millimeter, each side has to be 1 millimeter, and I have a cube of that. In that cube, I can fit 5 million red blood cells. That's how tiny they are. They're trying to tell you about the size of the cell. So once I have those red blood cells, they also help us in transport of gases, especially oxygen. Oxygen is transported by red blood cells, which means if you have good amount of red blood cells, your body would have a lot of energy because it has a lot of oxygen. If the amount of red blood cells fall in the body, then it would create problems because you can't have that much amount of energy anymore. Moving on to, red blood cells need to adapt because they have a very, very important function in the body. And because of that, they're a little different from any other cell. So the first thing is their shape. They're biconcave. Like I said, they're hollow on the inside. What I mean by that is, if you look at a red blood cell from the top, that's how it looks like. So they show a dip or like a hollow area. But if you cut this cell right in the middle and look it from the bottom, so for example, looking from the top, you see this, but if you cut it and you look at it like this, then it would look like this. It's like a dumbbell shape, and this is known as the biconcave shape. Hazel Brown says how to download the mock test. Hazel, the link is provided to you in the comment section. At the top of it, you can see that it has been pinned for you guys. So you don't have to go through the entire chat section. You just can go on the top. The blue colored top has a pinned section which shows you that you can download the mock test from there. For anybody who has still not downloaded the mock test, you should download it. It's a free mock test to tell you what kind of questions come in GCSE finals. It's been made from the past year question papers, so you can use it, and it's been given to you in the comment section. Now, Moving on to that they have a biconcave disc for increased surface area to volume ratio for diffusion. This said a lot. Suddenly a lot of things came here. It says biconcave disc, the shape, for increased surface area. First let's focus on the surface area. What is the surface area? And even if we understand the surface area, how does it increase the surface area? So for that, I've made the dumbbell cell. Let me make a cross section of a normal cell. That would be it. If you compare the periphery, the perimeter of these two, you would find that the dumbbell cell has way much more than any other cell, like a normal one. So it has to increase the surface area, while the volume of the cell is still that much, which was supposed to be. So same volume, but more surface area is provided. That is first. Second, it says that's for diffusion. Now, if you guys remember the first chapter, which is cell biology, where you guys learned about the transport, in that section, we talked about diffusion as well. Diffusion is like ghost movement through walls, right? And through walls, gases can be transported easily. So that's why, because red blood cells take oxygen with them, they need to have diffusion. And for diffusion, we need thin walls. So that's what it's going to have, large surface area and easy movement of oxygen. Second is that it carries hemoglobin. It's a pigment. Hemoglobin is what gives red color to your blood or your red blood cells. This pigment is provided to you, and because of this, oxygen can bind with the blood cell. If you don't have oxygen, for example, you don't have hemoglobin, you can't bind oxygen with the red blood cells. So the part of the red blood cell where the hemoglobin is bound, that is hemoglobin. Where can I submit the mock test papers? Kumar, you can do it at home, and if you have any doubts, you can schedule a doubt session with us. For that, they would provide you contact information in the chat section itself, and you can use that contact information. And if you have any doubts, or there is a answer key attached to it, so you can solve it for yourself and check it. But even then, if you have some doubts or you want to clear them out, you can have a doubt session scheduled with me, and I will clear them personally. Okay? You can also send your queries if you want to in the Telegram group that's given in the chat section. Okay, now hemoglobin, which means I have hemoglobin, then I can get my oxygen bound with my red blood cells. Last is that it has no nucleus. I just said that the only function of red blood cells is to transport oxygen, and for that they need hemoglobin. Now, if a cell is bound to do only one thing, and in order to do that one thing, it needs hemoglobin, which means it does not require nucleus first. Second, it needs way much more space for hemoglobin than it does for nucleus. So there is no nucleus in red blood cells. And that's one thing that you can remember about them. For example, you see a cell without a nucleus that looks hollow to you, blindly it is a red blood cell. Because no other cell that's been given in your syllabus actually is a cell without a nucleus. We don't have a lot of cells without nucleus. Red blood cell is the only one. So as soon as you see a cell without a nucleus, go for red blood cells. Now, what do you think is happening in this GIF? I see something like a slime moving around, and from what I can think of, it's trying to chase something that looks black, and it's running around. This is actually white blood cell. That's what they do. 𝐿𝐴𝐴, hi, how are you? So this is the function of white blood cells. White blood cells chase the pathogens. Now there are, variety of white blood cells, but all of them have the same function, which is to work towards the immunity of the body in order to protect the body from any kind of harm that may come from the outside. First is that they are way much more bigger than red blood cells. For this, I want you guys to remember the first slide where we saw the blood under the microscope. It was like a blob right in the middle. That's a white blood cell. Compare that to red blood cells, it was quite huge. So because they are too big, the lesser in number, they do contain a nucleus and they help, or they are a part of human body's defense system. Which means defense system is basically when we need to protect. For example, our country's defense system is to protect our country from any harm that may come from the outside. Similarly, Dennis says that's our body. It's in the body, yes, and it is a white blood cell. So when you have bacteria in your body, they're chased by white blood cells. So that slime is a white blood cell. That black colored thing that was running, that is running forward, is actually a pathogen or a bacteria. So human defense system would protect you from bacteria, viruses, protistans, any kind of harm that comes from the outside. So we have a lot of different types of blood cells, white blood cells, which help us produce different kind of things. The first thing is a lymphocyte. The first kind of cell is a lymphocyte that produce antibodies. Now, antibodies, what are those? So antibodies are, for example, this is a bacteria, let's say. What would happen? Let's say this bacteria comes in my body. Now that's my blood cells. My white blood cell would look at it and be like, you don't belong here, who are you? So they're talking now. Once the body recognizes, once my white blood cells recognize that this something came from the outside, my body thinks that this may potentially be a harm. So what it does is, it calls upon all the white blood cells. Now I have an army of white blood cells, a lot of them here. All of them would produce antibodies, and by this time, this bacteria or virus would also have been making its own army because it's dividing. Now I have two armies, they would fight. But my antibodies are made specially for my bacteria because they studied the bacteria first, they had a conversation, right? So once they understand the bacteria, they make specific antibodies. So as soon as they touch, my bacteria die. That's what antibodies are. They're made specifically for the cell that is supposed to be killed. It may be a bacteria, it may be a virus, but it's usually more bacteria than viruses. Now coming to the next thing, which is some produce antitoxins against the poison made by microorganisms. Antitoxins. Now, a bacteria is very small. Like, look at a human body, and yes, 𝐷𝐿, it is for GCSE. It's GCSE biology. So, talking about the bacteria. Now, this body is so huge. I have a huge body. Compared to that, the bacteria is too small. But bacteria release toxins in my body. Not that they can kill me because I'm too huge as compared to them, but at the same time, what happens is, because my body, my cells are coming in contact with the bacteria, they're all irritated because of that bacteria's toxins. So they basically irritate my cells. I may have redness, rashes, itchiness sometimes. So those all come as a result of bacteria. And antitoxins are produced by my white blood cells to make sure that I can kill that, or I can basically neutralize my toxins. Coming to phagocytes. This is a phagocyte. The jelly running around is a phagocyte. So what it does is, it engulfs and digests the invading bacteria and viruses. So it's going to run behind any bacteria or any virus that it sees, and because they're just one or two, my cell engulfs it. It's almost like eat it, but because the cell does not have a mouth, do not use the word eat in the exam, say engulf. So they engulf it and they digest it and the cell is gone. So my body is saved from the bacteria now. Moving on to this. What do you think is happening in this GIF? Quickly, think about it. Now what I see here is there's a blood vessel, there is blood going on, and they suddenly start to stick at one place. And I also see that the plates, but as soon as they stick to that thing, they become something with a tentacle. These, the white cup-shaped cells, when they go onto the site, they become tentacles. Those are platelets. Platelets are fragments of cells. Again, for this, remember the first slide that we saw. In the first slide, tiny splashes were there, only 4 of them, blue colored splashes. Those were platelets. So they're so small that some scientists say that we can't consider them as cells because they're too small as compared to cells. And because they don't have a nucleus, all the more reason to not try and call them cells. Instead, we call them fragments of cells. They help in blood clotting at the site of wound. So for example, you got a cut somewhere. In order to stop the bleeding at that point, you need platelets. They would clot my blood. And these are enzyme controlled reactions. So what happens is my body has a cut, and then the cells surrounding that cut would try and call the platelets. They'll be like, we have a cut, you need to fill this up. The platelets come. The enzymes change them from plate shaped to tentacles. Once that happens, I have platelets, and then they can secure the site of the wound. It's almost like they close it. And then fibrins catch the red blood cells, more platelets, form a jelly-like clot to stop bleeding. They're basically trying to stuff the site. They would take anything and everything that they can to stop the bleeding. So what they do is, platelets are already coming, but if they find white blood cells, they would catch them, stuff them into the cut. And once that happens, my wound is closed off. If that happens, we have a jelly-like coat. Now scab forms from that jelly-like coat. So initially scab is very soft, it's jelly-like, but then it dries and hardens, and then it forms a scab. And that's why your parents say that you should not remove your scabs on your own. You should let them go on their own. Why? Because this is a cut, this is your scab. Your body is trying to fix it up on the inside. You remove the scab, the bleeding would happen again. So you should not remove the scab, so that in peace the body can heal itself, and once it has, it would just push off the scab because it does not need any anymore. So that's why don't remove your scabs. Moving on to the blood vessels. We have 3 types of blood vessels: veins, arteries, and capillaries. They're ABC named on the slide. From ABC, one is vein, one is artery, and then other one is a capillary. Which one out of all of these do you think should be a vein? Should it be A, should it be C, or should it be B? And then same question for arteries. Do you think arteries is A, C, or B? Same with capillaries. Which one do you think is what? Now those who are watching here, please like, share and subscribe the channel, and I hope you are enjoying. I hope you're learning something new that you have not so far, or something that you find confusions with. I hope it's cleared now. So like the video, share it with your friends and subscribe the channel. Now, it's actually vein that is A. It's the artery that is B, and capillary that is C. How do I know? I see this in the vein. So it's like this. On the inside, it has something that's coming out. That's a valve. We'll talk about valve more when we're going to talk about the heart. But you should know that it has valves so that the blood does not flow back. For example, veins are the ones that bring the blood from my feet to my heart back up against the gravity. So I have valves So what happens is, this is my vein, let's say. The blood is going up. So walls are there so that they open, let the blood up, and then they close. So that because of gravity, the blood can't come down. And then when there's a pressure from the bottom, they would open again and then close. Then the pressure from the bottom, open, close. But they would never let the blood from the top to go down again to your feet. So those are veins. Capillaries are a connection between arteries and veins, and what they let us do is share. They let us basically like exchange, let's say glucose, carbon dioxide, oxygen. Some gets in the blood, some goes out from the blood. Let's say if this is a muscle, maybe I'm giving this muscle oxygen and I'm taking carbon dioxide back from it. So all that exchange happens at the capillaries, because capillaries are a lot thinner and they're too many, so large surface area and less thin of a wall. While you look at veins, they have so many walls. Same with B, which is artery. They also have too many walls. So exchange can't happen in those blood vessels. Artery. Artery is the one that takes the blood to the body. And these are the ones that are narrow, a lot narrow, like compare this with this. It's quite tiny in comparison, so they're thin, and that's why they have a large blood pressure. They have a high blood pressure in them. Now we're very confused with which one takes it where. We're always confused while thinking about if the veins take it to the heart or arteries take it to the heart. A lot of confusion there. Let me solve it for you guys. So first is vein, and the other one is artery. And I'm going to start with artery because then it would make more sense to you guys. A for artery, A for away, away from heart. So you can remember it by A. A for artery, A for away. Arteries take the blood away from the heart. So whether it is going to any other part of the body, brain, legs, hands, stomach, kidneys, anywhere, wherever it is going, if it's coming from the heart, which means the blood is going away from the heart, that has to be an artery. Which means by default, vein would be the one to take it to the heart. And that's how you can remember it. Then it says blue and red. Yes, you can do blue and red as well. Blue is for vein and red is for artery. But blue and red don't really mean veins and arteries. They actually signify the type of blood. What kind of blood is present in the parts of the heart. So you can hear itself, write it down, that blue would always mean that it is deoxygenated. Now a lot of kids are confused with deoxygenated. D means no oxygen, which means this one would have a carbon dioxide. Similarly, arteries were written red, so they would be oxygenated. And because they are oxygenated, they would have oxygen in them. So that's how you can remember it. Arteries away from the heart, and they're hot and they're red. So you can remember the heart is the red one, so the blood that's going away from the heart is red. The one that's coming to the heart becomes blue because it's gone to entire body. So it's completely like tired. So it's blue. So that's how you can remember it, and remember what type of blood goes around. So this was about the blood vessels. Majorly, these are the only things that you should remember about them. And although you should go into the details, read them once, but these help you in the topic of heart as well. So we've discussed. Moving on to Fizza. Fizza was the last live winner. She was the most interactive kid in the entire class. She gave me the most answers, and she was the one that was very interactive and very active in the class. So she was the winner of the last slide. You can be the next one. All you have to do is communicate with me through chat and be interactive in the class, talk about your doubts, answer the questions that I ask you, and maybe you'll be the one. Moving on to the heart. Now, I would say very few kids actually understand the entire concept of heart because there's too much to learn. So instead of going through around the entire thing, let's do it the easy way around. First thing that you should remember is right and left. Right side of the heart, the left side of the heart. The right side of the heart would always be deoxygenated. Always. And I mean forever. Which means, look on the inside of your elbow or the inside of your wrist. You would see some blue or green colored blood vessels. Those blood vessels which are blue-green, they are all going to the right side of the heart. Why? Because I just said that right side of the heart has deoxygenated blood, which means all the blue-green, which is all the deoxygenated blood from the entire body, has to go to the right hand side. And similarly, the left hand side would always be oxygenated. So you guys must have heard if somebody gets a cut on their neck or their wrist, they die. That's because that's an artery. It's coming from the left hand side directly, so it's just been pumped out with too much pressure. So that's why people can die because of it. But let's not go into the details of where the blood comes from and where it goes, because we'll have a flow chart to learn that. What we need to learn here is that heart is a muscle. In the first chapter, you guys learned about what a muscle cell is. And you also learned about that muscle cells get energy. Where do you think they get their energy from? But where does any cell get their energy from? The energy in any cell comes from mitochondria, because mitochondria performs respiration, right? So heart would also need oxygen and glucose so that it can pump properly. So remember that, because we are going to talk about diabetes, which is sugar. We're going to talk about the issues that happens because of sugar, but then we're going to relate how sugar or diabetes can also lead to cardiovascular diseases or diseases in the heart. Hazel Brown says mitochondria. That's correct. Very nice, Hazel. So heart is a muscle. So we're going to remember that for the future cases. Now coming on to that, like I said, the right side of the heart. So the right side of the heart is always deoxygenated, and then there's another circuit which is of oxygenated blood, which is the left side of the heart. So we're always going to have a circulation of oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood. Now, because a human heart has a separation of right side of the heart and the left side of the heart, and also has a separation of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, that means every drop of blood enters and leaves the heart twice, making the human circulation as double circulation. All the mammals have double circulation, which means every single drop of blood would enter the heart twice and leave the heart twice. Alpachana says, how many stages there are in diabetes? Darling, diabetes don't have stages. Diabetes have type. We have two types of diabetes. There's type 1 and there's type 2. And they're caused because of different reasons. If you guys have doubts in that, maybe in the next session, whenever we can discuss about the cardiovascular diseases, insulin, diabetes, and basically the non-communicable disease part of the syllabus. No worries about that. Okay, so this was about the circulation. Now there's one word that we must have heard, some of you must have, or some of you must have read about it. The word is pacemaker. Now, to understand pacemaker, you need to understand chorus. Chorus means exactly the one that people sing at school. So, kids at school sing choruses sometimes. In a chorus, what happens is, people sing together, right? So there's an entire section of people standing in a row singing together. But usually, the first note, the first sentence, the first voice comes from one person. The one person who's supposed to start the chorus. That person is the pacemaker. Because if that person starts late, everybody would start late. And if that person starts early, everybody would start early. So the person is the pacemaker. Similarly, in the heart, we have a natural pacemaker that sends electrical signals to the heart, telling them to contract at the same time, so that the heart can pump properly on time. But sometimes we have problems in that, which means we need to find out where this pacemaker is, because it says body's natural pacemaker. So we're going to talk about the parts of the heart, and then I would tell you where is the pacemaker exactly. Now, moving on to a little question right here. It says, why has the left side of the heart got more muscles than the right? So left side has more muscles, it says, and in here you can't see it, but if I go for forward ones, like look at this, and then compare it with this. So left side of the heart obviously have more muscles. Why do you think that is? Right side of the heart has more muscles because it is the one that's left side of the heart has more muscles because that's the part which is supposed to give blood to the entire body. From the right hand side, it only goes to the heart. We're going to talk about the circulation, and that's exactly why, which means from this side, from here, the blood is supposed to go out. When they contract, it is supposed to go out, and then it's supposed to go to the entire body. So I need to rush this. I need to have it with a lot of pressure, a lot of speed. So we pump it very tightly so that it rushes out, and when it does, it can go to the brain also, it can go to the toes as well. Now talking about the parts of the heart, how many of you actually recognize the parts of the heart? There's a huge one on the screen. How many of you think that you can actually label this heart? Think about it. And if you guys do remember any part of the heart, tell me in the comment section. Anyone? Nobody? You guys don't remember anything about the heart? Okay, let's first start with the chambers of the heart. I'll label the screen later, but for now, everybody look at my hands. Heart has two sides, which is something that we've discussed. The right side of the heart, the left side of the heart. Before going into the diagram, understand this, that what is your right is supposed to be the diagram's left, which means this is the diagram's right and this is the diagram's left. And that's exactly why I'm showing it to you with hands. So this is the right hand side, this is the left hand side. The right hand side of the heart has two chambers, so upper chamber, lower chamber. Similarly, the left hand side of the heart also has two chambers, upper chambers, lower chambers. So uppers and lowers. Now talking about the upper ones, because the heart pumps together, it goes like this. So because it is pumping together, it has to have some rhythm, and that's why the chambers are named the same. So you can remember one side and you would remember the second easily. So both the upper chambers are known as atria or atrium. Now a lot of kids are confused between atria and atrium. So I'm going to tell you, atria, I'm talking about plural. Atrium, I'm talking about one. So right atrium, left atrium. But if I'm talking about both of them together, the atria, right? So I have two atria, two ventricles at the bottom. So again, right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. These are the four chambers of the heart. That it says it has a cardio muscle. It does. And they're basically known as cardiac muscles. But yes, that's correct. They have specific heart muscles. Now talking about sides again, right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. These are the four chambers of the heart. And it has an entire circulation of the parts. So let's understand the parts and I'll tell you about them. So here comes my heart. Now it's tiny because we're going to label it. The first is aorta. Aorta has A. Artery has A. Aorta is an artery. The major one at that. It is the one that's going to take my blood from the heart to the entire body. So that's aorta. How can you remember that? A for aorta, A for artery. It's the major artery in the heart. Supervena cava. Vena cava has vein. It's the vein in the heart. And it's the major vein of the heart. The one that takes the entire blood from the body and let it enter the heart. The next one is right pulmonary artery. Pulmonary means lungs. Artery means away from the heart, which means it is taking the blood away from the heart to the lungs. The next one is right pulmonary vein. This one must be now easy. Pulmonary, lungs, vein to the heart. So this one is taking the blood from the lungs to the heart. Right atrium, the first chamber. Inferior vena cava. Now there was superior vena cava, the major vein. Now there's inferior. Superior and inferior means superior is coming from the upper side to the brain. Superior vena cava is coming from the upper body. Inferior vena cava is coming from the lower body. The legs, the stomach, the hips, the hands. All of that is coming from the lower end, which is the inferior one. So there's the same, just the major vein, but it has two ends. Right ventricle, the second chamber. Left ventricle, the fourth one. Left atrium, the third chamber. So right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. Then we have pulmonary veins. We talked about that. Pulmonary, lungs. Vein to the heart. So it's bringing the blood from the lungs to the heart. Pulmonary artery. Now I hope you guys understand the meaning of pulmonary artery. Pulmonary means lungs. Artery means away from the heart. So it is supposed to take the blood away from the heart to the lungs. Then we have pulmonary valve. Valve is that gate that we were talking about. So I'm supposed to have a lot of gates. In this we've seen exactly 4. Valve number 1, valve number 2, valve number 3, valve number 4. They are to make sure the blood doesn't go back up. I'm going to talk about this in a second. And these are the aortic valves that are taking the blood out. So these are the parts of the heart out of which this, these are the most important ones, because these pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein you've talked about. Vena cava, you can remember it once, that there is a vena cava. You can remember pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein. And valves, if you even forget them, it's okay. But now let's talk about the valves. I've told you guys how the pumping of the heart happens, right? So from the right side, let's start from the right top. Right atrium gets the blood, it pumps. When it pumps, when it contracts, what happens is the blood is supposed to go down. So what happens is, this gate opens and lets the blood in here. Once I have it, this gate is closed again. Why? Because I don't want the blood to go back again, ever, not back up at least. Then these are going to contract. When they do, this gate is already closed. So by default, I only have one way to go, here. And then this would also close. Why? Because I need to make sure that because this is against the gravity is going up, it does not come back down. Now you get it? Why the valves are there? They're making sure that blood only flows in one direction. Similarly, left atrium, blood gets here, it drops down here. As soon as it drops down, the gates close, the valves close. When they are closed, what happens? This contracts the ventricle, and the blood is now only having one way, which is in the aorta. And then as soon as it does, again this is anti-gravity, so it can come back. So to stop that, I need to close the gates as soon as the blood has left the heart. That's why we have valves, to make sure that there is no backflow of blood. Now do you guys get this? Does parts of the heart and the function of the valves make sense to you? Everybody understood everything? Do you guys have any doubt? If you do have a doubt, tell me that in the comment section. Now moving on to this. I want you guys to blindly copy this down, like as it is. I don't want you guys to think about anything. Copy this down. I'm making the arrows. All you have to do is make those arrows with me. After that, any question that comes from the circulatory system can be solved for you. So I'm going to use blue and red again to show deoxygenated and oxygenated blood. So I'm going to start with the body, vena cava. It's taking the blood to the right side of the body, and we did decide actually that the right side of the body is to be, right side of the heart is to be deoxygenated. So this is deoxygenated, so is this one, so would be this one. Once all of these three are done for, I am going to get the blood from the lungs. Now lungs gives us oxygen, so it can't be deoxygenated anymore. So I have oxygenated blood. Then it goes up and through the aorta it goes to the body. Now everyone, I want you guys to write this down as it is blindly. There are two types of blood vessels. Vena cava has vein, so it's the major vein in the body. Aorta has A, so it's the major artery of the body or the heart. Pulmonary artery away from the heart to the lungs. Pulmonary vein to the heart from the lungs. So this is the circulation of the heart. I hope all of this now makes sense to you. I hope you guys understand this. But let's go through the circulation once. From the entire body, the blood would get into the right side of the heart. Once it does, I pump. The blood drops down to the ventricle. Then the ventricles pump and the blood goes to the lungs. Once it reaches the lungs, it's going to give the carbon dioxide, takes oxygen, then comes back to the heart. In the left hand side, pump of the atria, pump of the ventricle, then it's supposed to leave the heart. When it leaves the heart, then it can go to the body, to the brain, to the heart, to the kidneys, any part of the body. So it would leave the heart and get the oxygen to the entire body. This is what the flow chart says, and this explains entire part of your circulatory system. If you guys are good at cramming up, then cram this up because this is very important. But if you guys are good at understanding, I would always suggest that understand the diagram and then remember it. And you can also always draw it in the corner of your answer sheet as soon as you get your answers. As soon as you get your papers, draw it in the corner so you remember it while answering the questions. Now let's look at how we can use all the information that we learned today to understand about the questions. Before that, Like I said just a moment ago, that the most attentive kid would get a free session. So you can have a free session. You can be the winner of this live by attempting the live, attending there, being attentive about it, answering the questions for me. And you have not enrolled with us, enroll with us, because our new batches have already started. We have started the syllabus, so you're running behind. Join with us and then we can complete the syllabus together. Now this diagram wraps it all up. Coming in the heart, leaving the heart, then in the left side coming in the heart, leaving the heart. Let's do the past year questions now. So it says, blood contains plasma, we know that, platelets, read about it, red cells and white cells. Each has one or more important function. In the table below, draw a line in each part to its function. One part has two functions, so draw a line for both the functions. This is your table that they're talking about. You have to match the following. So one part is the name of the part of blood. The functions are fights bacteria, carries dissolved hormones, carries dissolved urea, transports oxygen to the body, and helps the blood to clot. We've already just talked about all of this, so think about the answers and carefully answer them. Out of all of these, what do you think red blood cells do? Do you think they fight bacteria? Or do you think they carry dissolved hormones or urea? Do you think they transport oxygen to the body? Or do you think they help my blood clot? Think about it. Now I want answers from you guys. Hazel says clot. I might have to say no to that. Blood does not help, like red blood cells don't help you clot. Red blood cells help you transport the oxygen to the body. So that's for red cells. Platelets. Platelets help in clotting the blood. So they help you clot the blood once you are bleeding. Coming to plasma, like I said, anything that has to transport, anything that has to go from one part of the body to the other would have to go through the plasma, because that is the only liquid medium. So it would carry dissolved hormones and dissolved urea. White blood cells were only left with one, which is that it would have to fight the bacteria. I hope you guys get it. Now in the question it was specified that one of these has two functions, but that is not something that would always happen. Sometimes you would have to naturally do it because it does have two functions. So carefully read the question and then systematically try to answer the question. Okay, now it shows a diagram of blood seen through a microscope. Write the letter A, B, C or D next to each function. Transports oxygen. I just told you now. What do you think transports oxygen? Anyone? Dennis? Hazel? Alpacina? Anyone? Do you guys know about it? You guys are lazy today. It has to be the red cells, because we just learned about that red blood cells have hemoglobin which sticks to the oxygen. Helps clot at the site of a cut. Oh, Alpacina finally replied. Okay, I'm going to wait for now. So Alpacina said red blood cells, that is correct. But now in this question, Alpa, you have to remember that you can't say red blood cells. You would have to say the alphabet, because it says write the correct letter, which is A, B, C or D. So you can't say red blood cells, you would have to say B. So similarly, now go for help the blood to clot at the site of cut. Which one helps in clotting? What helps in clotting? Okay, I'm going to say the answer in 3, 2 and 1. It's C. C for platelets. So platelets help you clot the blood. Moving on to the last one, which is transports urea. We just did it in the last question again, which is plasma, so it would be A. Perfect. Now, if you guys want to stay connected with us, and if you guys want to have regular updates on what we're doing, when is the event, when do you have to join the event, what's the time, what are the topics, when is the mock test coming out, we also post some questions for you every single day. So if you guys want to stay updated with Glecta, you guys can join our Telegram group. The link has been shared in the chat, which would be again shared soon. Then you can join our YouTube channel, and you can also join us on Facebook. So all these together, and if you guys want any contact information, it's written on the screen, it's going down below here also, and you can also use the information that's provided to you in the chats. I hope you guys have downloaded the mock test. Okay, now coming to the question of the heart. Oh, we're almost off the time. So we're just gonna go through this question, and then we're gonna wrap up. So it says, heart is also part of the circulatory system. We learned that. Figure 1 shows a section through the human heart. Okay. Which arrow, A, B, C, or D, shows the blood leaving the heart in the pulmonary artery to the lungs? In the flow chart, you guys have the answer to that. We've understood that. So, which arrow do you think it should be? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It should be B. Why? Because the pulmonary artery leaves from the right ventricle, and here's the right ventricle, so it's going to go up, so it's going to be B that takes the blood to the lungs. And for the next one, which is it shows the blood from the lungs entering the heart via pulmonary vein. Now it comes from the lungs to the right atrium. D is entering the right atrium, so the answer has to be D. So like that, you can use that flow chart to answer all the questions that you want to. Now we're still left with a few questions. I hope we can do them in the next class. But for now, because I would have to take my leave, these are the information for the next live, which would happen on Saturday. Do join, and that would help you in your exams, I hope. And I hope you liked the lesson. If you did, like, share, and subscribe. Like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe our channel so you're updated on all of them, and you can meet us in the next live. Maybe be the most interactive kid then. So this would be it for today. I hope you guys had a great lesson, and I'll see you guys the next time. Bye bye everyone. Take care.